Chapter 1. The Invitation to Holly Manor. The late afternoon sun cast a pale golden glow over St. Mary Mead, its rays filtering through the lace curtains of Miss Jane Marple's modest sitting room. The air carried the crisp bite of December 1934, and the faint scent of wood smoke mingled with the lavender polish of her well-kept furniture. On the table before her lay a letter, its thick cream paper embossed with an elegant crest, a holly wreath entwined with a ribbon. Miss Marple adjusted her spectacles, her keen eyes scanning the words for the third time. Dear Miss Marple, your reputation for insight precedes you. I humbly request your presence at Holly Manor for a Christmas gathering, December 23rd to 26th. It promises to be a festive occasion, though I confess certain matters may require your particular discernment. A car will collect you at noon on the 23rd. I trust you will not decline. Yours sincerely, Sir Henry Ashford. Miss Marple pursed her lips, her delicate fingers tracing the edge of the envelope. Sir Henry Ashford, a retired diplomat, was not a man given to cryptic flourishes. Yet the phrase, particular discernment, lingered in her mind like a misplaced stitch in a knitting pattern. She glanced at the fire crackling in the hearth, her thoughts drifting to the quiet scandals of village life. Petty thefts, whispered affairs, nothing to rival the undercurrent of unease this invitation suggested. Another Christmas alone would have been quite dull, she murmured to herself, her voice soft but laced with a spark of curiosity. But Holly Manor? Now that's rather unexpected. The following morning, promptly at noon, a sleek black Daimler purred up to her cottage. The driver, a young man with a nervous twitch in his left eye, tipped his cap as he opened the door. Miss Marple, Sir Henry's expecting you. Bit of a drive to Gloucestershire, so best make yourself comfortable. Miss Marple settled into the plush leather seat, her knitting bag tucked beside her. The countryside rolled by in a blur of frost-dusted hedgerows and bare oaks, their branches clawing at the grey sky. She pondered Sir Henry, whom she'd met once at a charity bazaar in London. A widower of 60, with a reputation for hosting lavish yet peculiar gatherings. Why, she wondered, had he thought of her? Holly Manor came into view as the car crested a hill. The Elizabethan pile loomed against the winter sky, its ivy-clad towers and mullioned windows exuding both grandeur and secrecy. Snow dusted the manicured lawns, and a towering Christmas tree glittered in the forecourt, its ornaments catching the fading light. As the car crunched to a halt on the gravel drive, a butler, stiff as a starched collar, emerged to greet her. Miss Marple, he intoned, his voice as cold as the air. Sir Henry awaits you in the drawing-room. This way, if you please. The hall was a spectacle of festive opulence. Garlands of holly and mistletoe draped the oak-panelled walls, and a chandelier cast prisms of light across the marble floor. Miss Marple's sensible shoes clicked softly as she followed the butler, her eyes darting to the portraits lining the walls, stern-faced Ashfords gazing down, their expressions hinting at untold stories. In the drawing-room, Sir Henry stood by a roaring fire, his silver hair gleaming under the glow of a Tiffany lamp. He turned, his face breaking into a warm but faintly strained smile. Miss Marple, how good of you to come! I trust the journey wasn't too taxing. Not at all, Sir Henry, she replied, her tone polite but probing. Though I confess, your invitation has piqued my curiosity. You mentioned matters requiring discernment. Sir Henry's smile faltered, his fingers tightening around his glass of sherry. All in good time, my dear lady. First, let me introduce you to the others. We're a small party this Christmas, Carefully chosen, you might say. The door creaked open, and a young woman in a fur-trimmed coat swept in, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Oh, Sir Henry, this place is simply divine!" she exclaimed, then paused, eyeing Miss Marple. "And who might this be?" "Miss Jane Marple," Sir Henry said smoothly, "a friend with a remarkable knack for observation. Miss Marple, this is Miss Clara Wentworth, an actress of some renown." Clara's smile was dazzling but brittle, like a cracked porcelain teacup. "Charmed, I'm sure," she said, her eyes flickering with something. Suspicion, perhaps? Before Miss Marple could ponder further, the butler announced the arrival of another guest, and the room began to hum with the promise of secrets yet to unfold. As Miss Marple took her seat by the fire, her knitting needles clicking softly, she felt the familiar prickle of anticipation. Holly Manor, with its festive cheer and shadowed corners, was already whispering of a mystery. And she, Jane Marple, was ready to listen. Before we move on, Detective, where in the world are you solving mysteries with us? Drop your location in the comments. And if you're craving more twisted tales, hit subscribe. Tomorrow's case file gets even darker. Stay sharp. Chapter 2. The Guests Assemble. The drawing room of Holly Manor glowed with the warmth of the fire, its flickering light casting shadows that danced across the ornate wallpaper. Miss Jane Marple sat in a high-backed chair, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically, her eyes darting over the assembling guests like a hawk surveying a field. The air was thick with the scent of pine from the towering Christmas tree in the corner, its baubles glinting like watchful eyes. Sir Henry Ashford stood by the mantel, his posture stiff, as if bracing for an unseen storm. Miss Clara Wentworth, the actress introduced earlier, lounged on a velvet settee, her fur-trimmed coat discarded to reveal a silk dress that clung to her like a second skin. She sipped her sherry with practiced elegance, but her eyes flitted nervously toward the door. "Sir Henry, you've outdone yourself," she purred, gesturing at the room. "Though I must say this gathering feels curated. Who else is joining us?" Sir Henry cleared his throat, his smile tight. "Patience, Miss Wentworth. Our party is nearly complete." The door swung open, and the butler announced, "Mr. Lionel Drake and Mrs. Eleanor Drake." A wiry man in his 40s entered, his tweed suit impeccable, but his face etched with worry. Beside him was a woman of similar age, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her grey eyes cold as the snow outside. She clutched a beaded handbag, her fingers twitching. "Lionel's a barrister," Sir Henry said to Miss Marple in a low voice. "Quite brilliant, though prone to nerves. Eleanor, his wife, manages their estate in Kent. Formidable woman." Miss Marple nodded, noting the way Eleanor's gaze swept the room, as if cataloguing every detail. Lionel, meanwhile, fidgeted with his cufflinks, avoiding Clara's curious stare. Next came Dr. Rupert Grayson, a portly man with a walrus moustache and a booming laugh that seemed forced. "Good heavens, Ashford, this place is a mausoleum," he declared, clapping Sir Henry on the shoulder. "Hope you've got enough brandy to keep us warm." His medical bag, slung over one arm, clinked faintly, suggesting more than stethoscopes inside. "Dr. Grayson's a Harley Street man," Sir Henry murmured to Miss Marple. "Specializes in nerves. Bit of a gossip, mind you." The final guest arrived with a gust of cold air. "Miss Violet Harrow," the butler intoned. A young woman, barely 20, stepped in, her plain wool coat and wide eyes marking her as out of place among the polished company. Her blonde curls were damp from the snow, and she clutched a worn leather satchel. "Violet's my ward," Sir Henry explained, his tone softening. "An orphan, poor thing, studying botany at Oxford, sharp as a tack but shy." Miss Marple's lips twitched into a faint smile. Shy, perhaps, but Violet's eyes were alert, scanning the room with a quiet intensity that reminded her of a village girl she once knew. Meek on the surface, but fiercely observant. As the guests exchanged polite greetings, the atmosphere crackled with unspoken tensions. Clara's laughter was too bright. Lionel's hands shook as he accepted a drink, and Eleanor's smile never reached her eyes. Dr. Grayson monopolized the conversation, regaling them with a tale of a patient's scandalous affair, while Violet sat silently, her satchel hugged to her chest. Sir Henry clapped his hands. "Dinner will be served shortly, but first, a toast to Christmas." He raised his glass, and the others followed, though Miss Marple noted the hesitation in their movements, as if each feared the glass might bite. As they moved toward the dining room, a sudden crash echoed from the hall. The group froze. The butler hurried out, returning, moments later with a frown. "One of the Christmas tree ornaments, sir," he said to Sir Henry. "It's fallen and shattered." "An accident, no doubt," Sir Henry said, but his voice wavered. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Accidents, in her experience, were rarely so innocent. She followed the group, her knitting bag swinging lightly at her side. Holly Manor was alive with secrets, and the broken ornament was merely the first thread in a tapestry she was determined to unravel. Chapter 3. The Broken Ornament. The dining room of Holly Manor was a study in grandeur, its long mahogany table gleaming under the soft glow of candelabras. Crimson damask curtains framed tall windows, beyond which snow fell in silent swirls, cloaking the Gloucestershire hills in white. Miss Jane Marple sat between Violet Harrow and Dr. Rupert Grayson, her sharp eyes noting the strained smiles of the guests as they took their places. The crash of the ornament still lingered in the air like an uninvited guest, and Sir Henry's attempt at joviality felt forced as he carved the roast. "Such a pity about that ornament," Clara Wentworth said, her voice dripping with theatrical concern. She twirled a wineglass, her scarlet nails catching the candlelight. "Was it terribly valuable, Sir Henry?" "Oh, just a trinket," Sir Henry replied, too quickly, his knife pausing mid-slice. "One of many. The tree's still splendid, wouldn't you say?" Miss Marple's lips twitched. She had seen the butler's face when he reported the incident. Pale, almost alarmed. Trinkets didn't provoke such reactions. As the soup course was served, she turned to Violet, whose hands fidgeted with her napkin. "You're studying botany, Miss Harrow. How fascinating. Do you find much to observe in a place like this?" Violet's eyes flicked up, wide but wary. "Oh yes, Miss Marple. The manor's grounds have rare hollies. I was sketching them earlier." Her voice was soft, but there was a tremor in it, as if she were guarding a thought. "Careful with those hollies," Dr. Grayson boomed from Miss Marple's other side, his moustache quivering. "Some are poisonous, you know. Wouldn't want our young scholar nibbling the wrong berry." He laughed, but it died under Eleanor Drake's icy stare from across the table. The conversation limped along, punctuated by the clink of silverware and Lionel Drake's nervous coughs. Miss Marple's mind, however, was on the ornament. After the main course, she excused herself, citing a need for fresh air, and slipped into the hall. The Christmas tree stood sentinel, its branches heavy with glass baubles, ribbons, and tinsel. At its base, a housemaid was sweeping up shards of glass, her movements hurried. "Oh, do be careful, my dear," Miss Marple said kindly, kneeling beside her. "Might I see the pieces? I've a fondness for old decorations." The maid hesitated, then handed over a few fragments wrapped in a cloth. "Miss, Marple turned them over in her gloved hands. The ornament had been a delicate sphere, painted with a winter scene, but inside one shard, folded tightly, was a scrap of paper. She unfolded it discreetly, her heart quickening. In a hurried scrawl, it read, 12 nights, 12 clues, trust no one. She tucked the paper into her sleeve and returned the shards to the maid, her face serene. Such a shame, she murmured, but her mind raced. 12 clues. The phrase echoed the rhythm of a carol, and the warning, trust no one, suggested a game far darker than Christmas cheer. Back in the dining room, the mood had shifted. Clara was recounting a West End triumph, but her eyes darted to Sir Henry, who was staring into his wine. Lionel whispered something to Eleanor, who shook her head sharply. Violet clutched her satchel, and Dr. Grayson's joviality seemed to mask a restless energy. As dessert was served, plum pudding flaming with brandy, Miss Marple caught Sir Henry's gaze. "A lovely evening," she said lightly. "Though I wonder, Sir Henry, do all your decorations hold such surprises?" His fork clattered against his plate, and for a moment the room stilled. "Surprises?" he said, recovering with a chuckle. "Only the festive kind, I assure you." But Miss Marple's smile was knowing. The first clue had been found, and Holly Manor's secrets were beginning to glitter like the shards of that broken ornament. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Snow. The snow fell thicker now, blanketing Holly Manor's grounds in a hush that seemed to muffle even the secrets within its walls. Breakfast the next morning, December 24th, 1934, was a subdued affair. The clink of porcelain and the murmur of small talk overshadowed by the memory of the shattered ornament. Miss Jane Marple sat at the dining table, her toast untouched, her eyes flitting between the guests. Sir Henry Ashford's forced cheer as he passed the marmalade did little to ease the tension. Clara Wentworth, resplendent in an emerald green morning dress, leaned toward Violet Harrow, who sat quietly buttering a scone. "You're awfully quiet, darling," Clara said, her voice honeyed but sharp. "Not still spooked by that silly ornament, are you?" Violet's cheeks flushed. "No, Miss Wentworth. I was just thinking about my sketches." Her hand rested protectively on her leather satchel, which never seemed to leave her side. "Leave the girl be," Dr. Rupert Grayson interjected, his walrus moustache twitching as he stirred his tea. "Not everyone's cut out for your theatrics, Clara." His tone was jovial, but his eyes lingered on Violet, assessing. Miss Marple's knitting needles clicked softly in her lap. She noted Lionel Drake's nervous glance at his wife, Eleanor, who sat ramrod straight, her lips a thin line. Something unspoken passed between them, like a shadow flitting across the snow outside. After breakfast, Sir Henry suggested a walk to the village church for the Christmas Eve carol service. "A fine tradition," he said, his voice strained. "The Manor's carol books are in the library. Shall we fetch them?" The library was a cavernous room, its shelves heavy with leather-bound tomes, and the air scented with old paper and wax polish. A fire crackled in the grate, casting a warm glow over the group as they gathered around a table where a stack of carol books lay. Miss Marple picked one up, its cover embossed with holly leaves, and flipped through it. Her fingers paused as a faint irregularity caught her eye. A page had been torn out, leaving a jagged edge. "Curious," she murmured, loud enough for Sir Henry to hear. "One of the carols is missing." Sir Henry's face paled, but he recovered quickly. "Oh, these old books! Pages fall out all the time. Probably good King Wenceslas, never my favourite." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Perhaps, though I'd wager it was the 12 Days of Christmas, Fitting, don't you think, given last night's message? The room stilled. Clara's laugh was brittle. Message? Really, Miss Marple, you sound like a detective in one of those dreadful novels. Do I? Miss Marple said mildly, but her mind was racing. The note from the broken ornament, 12 nights, 12 clues, trust no one, had pointed to a pattern, and this missing page was no accident. She glanced at the other guests. Lionel's hands trembled as he clutched a carol book. Eleanor's gaze was fixed on the window, and Violet's fingers tightened on her satchel. Dr. Grayson, meanwhile, hummed a tune, but his eyes darted to Sir Henry. As the group set out for the church, bundled in coats and scarves, the snow crunched underfoot. Miss Marple lagged behind, her sensible boots leaving neat prints. Violet fell into step beside her, her breath clouding in the frosty air. "Miss Marple," she whispered, "did you really find something in that ornament?" Miss Marple's smile was gentle but guarded. "Oh, my dear, I find many things when I look. Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual about our host?" Violet hesitated, then shook her head. "He's been kind to me," but her voice dropped lower. "Last night, I saw him in the hall, talking to someone. I couldn't hear, but he looked frightened." Before Miss Marple could press further, Clara's voice rang out from ahead. "Hurry up, you two! We'll miss the first hymn!" Her tone was playful, but her glance back was sharp, as if she'd overheard. The church bells tolled in the distance, and Miss Marple tucked Violet's words away like a stitch in her knitting. The second clue had emerged, and the melody of the 12 days of Christmas seemed to hum beneath the snow, promising more secrets to uncover. Chapter 5. The second clue, the missing carol. The village church of St. Bartholomew's glowed softly under the falling snow. Its stained glass, windows casting jewel-like patches of light onto the pews. The carol service had just ended, and the strains of "O Come All Your Faithful" still lingered in the frosty air, as the guests from Holly Manor made their way back through the village on Christmas Eve, 1934. Miss Jane Marple walked at a measured pace, her scarf tucked neatly around her neck, her eyes scanning the group ahead. The missing page from the carol book weighed on her mind, its absence as deliberate as the cryptic note from the broken ornament. Sir Henry Ashford led the party, his cane tapping the snowy path, but his usual charm seemed frayed, his glances darting towards the shadows. Clara Wentworth, arm looped through Dr. Rupert Grayson's, laughed too loudly at one of his anecdotes, her fur hat tilted at a jaunty angle. Lionel and Eleanor Drake walked in silence, their steps out of sync, while Violet Harrow trailed behind, clutching her satchel as if it held her very life. "Such a quaint service," Miss Marple said to Violet, her voice warm but probing. "Though I couldn't help but notice we skipped the 12 days of Christmas. Perhaps because of that missing page." Violet's eyes widened, her breath catching. I didn't notice," she stammered, but her fingers tightened on her satchel. "It's just a carol, isn't it?" "Is it?" Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her eyes were sharp as knitting needles. "In my experience, things that go missing are often meant to be found by someone." Before Violet could respond, a sharp cry came from ahead. Clara had slipped on an icy patch, and Dr. Grayson steadied her, his booming laugh echoing. "Careful, my dear! We can't have our star actress breaking a leg before the Christmas charades." Clara's smile was tight. "You're too kind, Doctor. Though I'd wager some here would prefer me out of the way." Her glance flicked toward Eleanor, who pretended not to hear. Back at Holly Manor, the group gathered in the drawing room for mulled wine and mince pies. The Christmas tree glittered, its remaining ornaments pristine, but Miss Marple's thoughts returned to the missing carol page. She excused herself to freshen up and slipped back to the library, where the carol books had been left. The fire had died to embers, and the room was dim, save for the moonlight streaming through the tall windows. She picked up the same carol book, its torn edge stark under her fingertips. As she examined it, a faint rustle came from behind a bookshelf. She froze, her heart steady but her senses alert. "Is someone there?" she called softly. No answer came, but a shadow moved, and a moment later the door clicked shut. Miss Marple's lips pursed. She knelt by the bookshelf, her gloved hand brushing the floor. There, tucked beneath a rug, was a crumpled piece of paper, the missing page. It was indeed from the 12 Days of Christmas, but scrawled across the lyrics in the same hurried hand, as the ornament's note were the words 2 turtle doves, 1 truth hidden. Miss Marple folded the page carefully and slipped it into her handbag, her mind whirring. 2 turtle doves, symbols of love, or perhaps loyalty. But whose truth was hidden, and why? She recalled Violet's nervous demeanour, Sir Henry's strange smiles, and Clara's barbed remarks. Someone in this house was playing a dangerous game, and the clues were piling up like snowdrifts. As she rejoined the group, Sir Henry was leading a toast. "To Christmas, and to secrets shared in good company," he said, his voice overly bright. The guests raised their glasses, but Miss Marple caught Eleanor's cold stare at her husband, Lionel's trembling hand, and Violet's quick glance toward the library door. "Secrets indeed," Miss Marple murmured, her knitting resuming its steady rhythm. The second clue had sharpened the mystery, and she sensed the next would cut even deeper. Chapter 6. Shadows by the Firelight. The drawing-room of Holly Manor was aglow with the flicker of firelight on Christmas Eve 1934, the air heavy with the scent of spiced wine and evergreen. The guests lounged on plush armchairs and settees, their faces illuminated by the flames, but the warmth did little to dispel the chill of unease that had settled over the group. Miss Jane Marple sat near the hearth, her knitting needles clicking softly, her eyes darting between the guests like a seamstress threading a needle through tangled cloth. The missing carol page and its cryptic message, 2 turtle doves, 1 truth hidden, lingered in her mind, a puzzle piece yet to find its place. Sir Henry Ashford stood by the Christmas tree, adjusting an ornament with exaggerated care. "Shall we have a game of charades?" he suggested, his voice strained with forced jollity. "Something to lift the spirits." Clara Wentworth clapped her hands, her smile dazzling but sharp. "Oh, splendid! I'll start. Something dramatic naturally." She struck a pose, but her eyes flicked toward Lionel Drake, who was nursing a brandy with trembling hands. "I'd rather not," Eleanor Drake said curtly, her grey eyes narrowing. "Games are for children." She sat rigidly, her beaded handbag clutched like a shield. Dr. Rupert Grayson chuckled, his walrus moustache quivering. "Come now, Mrs. Drake, a bit of fun won't hurt. Though I dare say some here are playing games already." His gaze lingered on Sir Henry, who turned away abruptly. Violet Harrow, tucked into a corner with her satchel, said nothing, but her fingers traced the leather as if it held answers. Miss Marple noted her unease, recalling the girl's whispered confession about Sir Henry's frightened demeanour in the hall. As the group debated charades, a piercing scream echoed from upstairs. The room froze. The butler, Mr. Perkins, appeared at the door, his face ashen. It's Mr. Drake's room, sir," he stammered, addressing Sir Henry. "The door's locked, and there's something odd inside." The guests hurried upstairs, Miss Marple trailing with surprising agility for her age. The corridor was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of beeswax polish. Lionel fumbled with his key, his hands shaking so badly that Sir Henry took it and unlocked the door. It swung open to reveal a small bedroom, its contents undisturbed save for one detail. On the wall above the bed, drawn in chalk, was a strange symbol. A circle with 3 curved lines radiating from its centre, like a claw or a trinity. "What in heaven's name is that?" Clara gasped, her hand at her throat. Lionel's face drained of colour. I don't know. The door was locked when we left for the carol service. No one could have gotten in." "Clearly someone did," Eleanor snapped, her voice like a whip. She turned to Sir Henry. "What kind of house are you running here?" Sir Henry's jaw tightened. "An oversight, I'm sure. Perkins, fetch the groundskeeper. Check the windows." Miss Marple stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the symbol. "Curious," she murmured, her tone mild but her mind racing. "It reminds me of something. Perhaps a heraldic mark." She glanced at Sir Henry, who avoided her gaze. Dr. Grayson peered at the chalk drawing, his joviality gone. "Looks like something a patient of mine once scribbled during a nervous episode. Pure nonsense, I'd say." "Or a message," Miss Marple said softly, her knitting bag swinging gently at her side. She noted Violet's quick intake of breath and the way Lionel's eyes darted to his wife. The symbol was the 3rd clue, she was certain, tied to the ornament's note and the missing carol page. But what did it mean? As the group dispersed, muttering about vandals or pranks, Miss Marple lingered, her fingers brushing the chalk. It was fresh, smudging easily. Someone in Holly Manor had been in this room, and the locked door suggested they knew its secrets well. The firelight downstairs had cast shadows, but the true darkness, she sensed, was yet to come. Chapter 7. The 4th clue, the poisoned wine. Christmas Eve dinner at Holly Manor was a lavish affair, the dining room resplendent with silver candelabras and a centrepiece of holly and crimson ribbons. The snow outside had thickened, cocooning the manor in silence, but within, the air crackled with tension. Miss Jane Marple sat at the table, her knitting tucked away, her eyes flitting over the guests on December 24th, 1934. The strange symbol in Lionel Drake's locked room lingered in her thoughts. A 3rd clue in a chain that began with a broken ornament and a missing carol page. Sir Henry Ashford presided over the feast, his smile as brittle as the ice on the windows. "To our health and happiness," he toasted, raising a glass of ruby-red claret. The guests followed suit, though their expressions betrayed unease. Clara Wentworth's forced gaiety, Lionel's pallor, Eleanor's icy reserve, Dr. Rupert Grayson's overly hearty chuckle, and Violet Harrow's nervous glance at her satchel. As the soup course gave way to pheasant, Clara leaned toward Miss Marple, her voice low and theatrical. "You're awfully quiet, Miss Marple. Not still fretting over that silly chalk scribble, are you?" "Oh, I fret over little things," Miss Marple replied mildly, her eyes twinkling. "They often lead to larger ones, don't you find?" Clara's smile faltered, and she turned to Dr. Grayson, launching into a story about a London gala. Miss Marple's attention shifted to Lionel, who was sipping his wine with a trembling hand. Suddenly, he coughed violently, his glass clattering to the table. His face turned ashen, and he clutched his throat, gasping. "Good heavens!" Dr. Grayson leapt to his feet, his medical instincts kicking in. "Perkins, water, quickly!" The butler rushed forward as Lionel slumped in his chair, his breath ragged but steadying. Eleanor's face was a mask of fury. "What is this, Henry?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "First locked rooms, now this." Sir Henry's hands shook as he signalled the staff. "An accident, surely. The wine—" "Not an accident," Dr. Grayson interrupted, sniffing Lionel's glass. His moustache twitched. "There's a bitter undertone. Possibly belladonna. Someone's tampered with this." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Violet's hands flew to her satchel, and Clara's eyes widened, though Miss Marple noted a flicker of something satisfaction in her expression. Sir Henry ordered the wine decanters removed, his face pale. "We'll get to the bottom of this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Might I see the glass, Doctor?" Grayson handed it to her, and she examined it under the candlelight. Etched faintly on the stem, almost invisible, was a tiny symbol. 3 curved lines radiating from a circle, identical to the one in Lionel's room. She slipped a napkin over the glass, preserving the mark, and met Sir Henry's gaze. "Curious, isn't it, how clues seem to follow us?" Sir Henry's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. As Dr. Grayson tended to Lionel, who was recovering with sips of water, Miss Marple's mind raced. The poisoned wine was the 4th clue, tied to the note's promise of 12 clues, and the carol's 4 calling birds. Belladonna, she recalled, was derived from deadly nightshade, a plant Violet, the budding botanist, might know well. As the meal resumed with strained civility, Miss Marple caught Violet's eye. "You study plants, my dear. Ever come across belladonna in your sketches?" Violet's cheeks flushed. I've read about it, yes, it's dangerous." Her voice was barely a whisper, and her fingers tightened on her satchel. The fire crackled, but the room felt colder. Vish! Marple's knitting resumed its rhythm, each stitch a step closer to unravelling the web of deceit. Someone at this table had laced the wine, and the symbol on the glass suggested they were playing a deadly game, one Miss Marple was determined to win. Chapter 8. The Christmas Eve Riddle. The clock in Holly Manor's drawing room struck 10 on Christmas Eve 1934, its chimes echoing through the tense silence that had settled over the guests. The poisoned wine incident had cast a pall over the festive mood, and the flickering firelight did little to warm the room's atmosphere. Miss Jane Marple sat in her usual corner, her knitting needles clicking steadily, her eyes sharp as they observed the strained faces around her. The 4th clue, the symbol etched on Lionel Drake's wineglass, had confirmed her suspicions. Someone in Holly Manor was orchestrating a dangerous game, and the clues were mounting like verses in a carol. Sir Henry Ashford stood by the Christmas tree, his hands clasped behind his back, his face etched with worry. "I assure you all," he said, his voice wavering, "the staff are investigating the wine. A dreadful mistake, nothing more." "A mistake?" Eleanor Drake snapped, her grey eyes blazing. "My husband could have died, Henry. This is no accident." Lionel, still pale but recovering, sat beside her, his hands clasped tightly, as if to anchor himself. Clara Wentworth, reclining on a settee with a glass of untouched sherry, raised an eyebrow. "Really, Eleanor, such drama. Perhaps Lionel simply drank too quickly." Her tone was light, but her eyes gleamed with something predatory. Dr. Rupert Grayson cleared his throat, his walrus moustache twitching. "Belladonna's no trifling matter, Miss Wentworth. Whoever did this knew their poisons." His glance slid toward Violet Harrow, who sat clutching her satchel, her face pale. Miss Marple's needles paused. "Curious, isn't it?" she said mildly, "how these incidents seem to follow a pattern. A broken ornament, A missing carol page, a strange symbol, and now poisoned wine. Almost like a riddle, don't you think?" The room stilled. Violet's breath hitched, and Sir Henry's fingers tightened on his cufflinks. Before anyone could respond, a low creak sounded from the far wall, near the oak-panelled bookshelves. The guests turned, startled, as a narrow section of the panelling swung inward, revealing a dark passageway. "Good heavens!" Dr. Grayson exclaimed, leaping to his feet. "A secret passage?" Sir Henry's face drained of colour. "An old feature of the manor," he said quickly. "Long forgotten. Probably a draught caused it to open." Miss Marple rose, her movements deliberate, and approached the passage. The air within was musty, scented with damp stone and thyme. On the inner edge of the panel, scratched faintly into the wood, was the now familiar symbol, a circle with 3 curved lines radiating outward. She turned to Sir Henry, her voice gentle but probing. "Forgotten, you say? Yet someone seems to know it well." Clara laughed, a brittle sound. "Oh, this is too perfect. A hidden passage, like something out of a melodrama. Who's playing the villain, I wonder?" "Enough, Clara," Eleanor said sharply. "This is no game." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "On the contrary, Mrs. Drake, I suspect it's precisely that. A game with very high stakes." She stepped closer to the passage, peering inside. A scrap of fabric, caught on a splinter, fluttered in the dim light. It was green wool, the same shade as Violet's coat. Violet gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. I've never been in there," she stammered, but her eyes were wide with fear. "No need to explain, my dear," Miss Marple said kindly, though her mind noted the discrepancy. The 5th clue, the hidden passage, echoed the carol's 5 golden rings, perhaps hinting at a cycle of deception. The symbol tied it to the previous clues, but the fabric suggested someone was moving through the manor unseen. As Sir Henry ordered the passage sealed until morning, the guests returned to their drinks, their voices hushed. Miss Marple resumed her knitting, her thoughts weaving a pattern as intricate as her stitches. The passage led somewhere, and she suspected it held the key to a past that someone was desperate to keep hidden. Chapter 9. The Christmas Eve Riddle. The great hall of Holly Manor shimmered with festive splendour on Christmas Eve 1934, its chandelier casting prisms of light across the polished marble floor. Garlands of holly and ivy draped the walls, and the towering Christmas tree sparkled, though its remaining ornaments seemed to mock the tension in the air. Miss Jane Marple sat near the fire, her knitting needles idle for once, her eyes sharp as she observed the guests gathered for a late-night sherry. The hidden passage, revealed hours earlier, had tightened the web of suspicion, and the 5th clue, its scratched symbol and the scrap of green wool, gnawed at her thoughts. Sir Henry Ashford stood by the hearth, his face haggard despite his tailored dinner jacket. "A toast," he said, raising his glass with forced cheer. "To Christmas and to resolution." His voice faltered, and Miss Marple noted the flicker of fear in his eyes. Clara Wentworth, resplendent in a sapphire gown, laughed lightly. "Resolution? My dear Sir Henry, you sound as if we're solving a murder mystery." Her tone was playful, but her glance darted toward Lionel Drake, who sat pale and silent, still shaken from the poisoned wine. "Hardly a laughing matter," Eleanor Drake snapped, her hands clenched around her glass. "Someone in this house tried to kill my husband. I demand answers, Henry." Lionel touched her arm, his voice low. "Eleanor, please, it was a mistake, surely." Dr. Rupert Grayson, sprawled in an armchair, swirled his sherry. Mistake or not, Belladonna, doesn't find its way into wine by accident. I'd wager someone here knows more than they're letting on." His eyes lingered on Violet Harrow, who sat in a corner, her satchel clutched tightly. Violet's cheeks flushed. "I don't know anything about poisons," she protested, her voice trembling. "I'm just here to study the grounds." Miss Marple's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Of course, my dear. Though I wonder if those sketches of yours might hold more than botanical notes." She spoke gently, but her words landed like a stone in still water. Violet's eyes widened, and she hugged her satchel closer. The conversation turned to lighter topics, Christmas traditions, village gossip, but Miss Marple's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the clues. The broken ornament's note, 12 nights, 12 clues, trust no one. The missing Carol page, 2 turtle doves, 1 truth hidden. The chalk symbol in Lionel's room, the poisoned wine with its matching mark, and now the hidden passage with its scrap of green wool. The carol, the 12 days of Christmas, seemed to guide the mystery, and tonight's 6 geese a-laying hinted at something productive, perhaps a secret about to hatch. She leaned toward Sir Henry, her voice soft. "This passage you mentioned, Sir Henry, was it used in the past, perhaps by your family? Old houses like this often have histories." Sir Henry's glass trembled. "Oh, just a relic from Elizabethan days. Smugglers, priests, that sort of thing. Long sealed, or so I thought." His laugh was hollow, and Miss Marple noted Clara's sharp glance at him, as if she sensed a lie. As the group sipped their drinks, a faint tapping came from the walls, like footsteps in the distance. The guests froze, and Dr. Grayson's moustache twitched. "Mice, no doubt," he said, but his hand tightened on his glass. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Mice don't wear boots, Doctor." She rose, her movements deliberate, and approached the panel where the passage had been revealed. She pressed her ear to the wood, hearing nothing now, but her fingers brushed the carved holly leaves on the panelling. Tucked into a crevice was a tiny slip of paper, folded tightly. She palmed it discreetly and returned to her seat. Later, in the privacy of her room, she unfolded it. In the same hurried scrawl as the previous clues, it read, "6 geese a-laying, secrets soon to break." Her heart quickened. The clues were accelerating, each one pointing to a truth buried in Holly Manor's past. But whose secrets were breaking, and who was so desperate to keep them hidden? As the clock chimed midnight, heralding Christmas Day, Miss Marple tucked the note into her knitting bag. The riddle was growing clearer, and she sensed the next clue would bring her closer to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 10. The Hidden Passage. Christmas morning, 1934, dawned crisp and bright at Holly Manor, the snow outside, sparkling like diamonds under a pale winter sun. Inside, the festive cheer was strained, the memory of poisoned wine and cryptic clues casting a shadow over the exchange of gifts in the drawing room. Miss Jane Marple sat by the fire, her knitting needles clicking softly, her eyes scanning the guests with the quiet intensity of a village gossip piecing together a scandal. The latest clue, 6 geese a-laying, secrets soon to break, had set her mind racing, and the hidden passage loomed large in her thoughts. Sir Henry Ashford presided over the gift-giving with forced joviality, handing out parcels wrapped in gold paper. Clara Wentworth unwrapped a silk scarf with a theatrical gasp, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Lionel Drake, still pale from the previous night's ordeal, managed a weak thank you for a leather-bound book, while Eleanor's gift, a silver brooch, earned only a curt nod. Dr. Rupert Grayson beamed over a bottle of fine brandy, and Violet Harrow blushed as she received a botanical journal, her fingers lingering on her ever-present satchel. Miss Marple, unwrapping a modest lavender sachet, smiled politely. "How thoughtful, Sir Henry, though I suspect this house holds gifts of a less tangible sort." Sir Henry's laugh was strained. "You're too kind, Miss Marple. Just enjoy the day, won't you?" As the group dispersed to dress for Christmas lunch, Miss Marple slipped away to the library, where the hidden passage had been revealed. The panel was shut but not locked, and she eased it open, her sensible shoes silent on the oak floor. The passage was narrow, its stone walls damp and cold, lit only by the faint glow of her pocket torch. The air smelled of earth and secrets, and she moved cautiously, her heart steady but her senses alert. At the end of the passage, a small alcove opened into a dusty chamber, its walls lined with shelves of old ledgers and a single, cracked portrait. The painting depicted a young woman, her face strikingly like Violet's, with the same wide eyes and delicate features. On the frame, a brass plaque read, "Lillian Ashford, 1890. Miss Marple's breath caught. Lillian Ashford, Sir Henry's late sister, who had died under mysterious circumstances decades ago. On the floor beneath the portrait lay a small, tarnished locket. Miss Marple picked it up, her gloved fingers brushing away dust. Inside was a faded photograph of two children, Lillian and a young boy, likely Sir Henry, and etched on the locket's back was the familiar symbol, a circle with 3 curved lines. Tucked inside was a folded note, its ink faded but legible. 7 swans are swimming, a past that won't stay drowned. Miss Marple's lips pursed. The 6th clue tied the passage to the Ashford family's history, and Lillian's portrait suggested a tragedy that still haunted Holly Manor. Violet's resemblance to Lillian was no coincidence, she suspected, and the locket's symbol linked it to the previous clues. As she returned to the library, she heard footsteps behind the panelling. She stepped back, her torch extinguished, and saw Clara Wentworth emerge, her face pale. "Miss Marple!" Clara exclaimed, her hand at her throat. "What are you doing here?" "Exploring," Miss Marple said mildly. "This old house is full of surprises, don't you find?" Clara's eyes narrowed, but she forced a smile. "You're too curious for your own good, Miss Marple. Be careful where you poke your nose." She swept past, her perfume lingering like a warning. At lunch, the guests' strained banter masked their unease. Miss Marple watched Violet closely, noting her nervous glances at Sir Henry. The locket, now tucked in her knitting bag, was a piece of the puzzle. But the past it pointed to was as murky as the waters of a swan-filled lake. The 7th clue was near, and Miss Marple sensed it would bring the truth closer to the surface. Chapter 11. The Final Gathering. The drawing-room of Holly Manor was steeped in the golden glow of candles on Christmas Day 1934. But the festive air was heavy with suspicion. The snow outside had ceased, leaving the Gloucestershire hills silent under a starlit sky. Miss Jane Marple sat by the fire, her knitting needles still, her eyes sharp as she surveyed the guests gathered for an after-dinner coffee. The locket from the hidden passage, with its cryptic note, 7 swans are swimming, a past that won't stay drowned, had confirmed her suspicions. The mystery was rooted in the Ashford family's past, and tonight she would draw the threads together. Sir Henry Ashford stood by the Christmas tree, his face gaunt despite his polished dinner jacket. Clara Wentworth lounged on a settee, her sapphire gown shimmering, but her smile was tight. Lionel Drake, recovered but nervous, clutched his coffee cup, while Eleanor's grey eyes darted between the guests like a hawk. Dr. Rupert Grayson's joviality had faded, his walrus moustache drooping as he sipped his drink. Violet Harrow, clutching her satchel, sat rigid, her resemblance to the portrait of Lillian Ashford haunting Miss Marple's thoughts. The silence was broken by a sharp clink as Eleanor set down her cup. "This has gone far enough, Henry," she said, her voice like cut glass. "Ornaments, poison, secret passages, what kind of charade are you playing?" Sir Henry's hands trembled. "I assure you, Eleanor, I'm as baffled as you are." "Are you?" Miss Marple's voice was gentle but piercing. "Forgive me, Sir Henry, but I've found that old houses like this one hold their secrets tightly, until someone forces them open." She paused, her eyes sweeping the room. "Shall we discuss the clues? A broken ornament with a note, a missing Carol page, a symbol in a locked room, poisoned wine, a hidden passage, and now a locket linking us to Lillian Ashford." The room froze. Violet gasped, her satchel slipping to the floor. Clara's eyes narrowed, and Lionel's cup rattled in its saucer. "Lillian?" Dr. Grayson said, his voice gruff. "Henry's sister. She died years ago. Tragic accident." "Was it?" Miss Marple's tone was mild, but her gaze pinned Sir Henry. "I've learned Lillian's death was never fully explained. And Violet, my dear, your resemblance to her is striking. Might you know more than you've shared?" Violet's face paled. I'm just Sir Henry's ward. I don't know anything about Lillian." Clara laughed, a brittle sound. "Oh, come now, Miss Marple, you're spinning tales. Next, you'll say one of us poisoned Lionel for some ancient grudge." "Perhaps not so ancient," Miss Marple replied. "The clues follow the 12 days of Christmas. Tonight's clue, 7 swans are swimming, suggests a truth rising to the surface. Lillian's death, I suspect, was no accident, and someone here knows why." Sir Henry's face crumpled. "Enough," he snapped, then softened. "Lillian, she fell from a balcony. A terrible night. I was a boy. There was no foul play." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "Yet someone is reminding us of her death. The locket I found bore the same symbol as the other clues, and tonight I found this." She produced a small folded note from her knitting bag. Its scrawl familiar. "8 maids are milking, a debt unpaid." Eleanor stood, her chair scraping. "This is madness. Who's leaving these notes?" "Someone who knows the manor's secrets," Miss Marple said. "The passage, the poison, the symbols, all point to a debt, perhaps one tied to Lillian's death. Sir Henry, was there a scandal? A lover? A rival?" Sir Henry sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "There was a man, a diplomat like me. Lillian loved him, but he vanished after her death. I thought it was grief." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Lionel, whose knuckles were white. "And you, Mr. Drake, your reaction to the poison suggests more than fear. Did you know this man?" Lionel's voice was barely a whisper. I was his clerk. I saw things, heard things, but I swear, I never— Enough!" Eleanor cut him off, her eyes blazing. "You're accusing my husband based on nothing." Miss Marple's smile was serene. "Not nothing, Mrs. Drake. The clues are speaking, and I'm listening." As the fire crackled, she sensed the truth was near, but one final twist awaited. Chapter 12. The 12th Clue. The Truth Unwrapped. The drawing room of Holly Manor glowed with the soft light of candles on Christmas night, 1934, but the festive warmth was eclipsed by a palpable tension. The snow-draped Gloucestershire hills outside lay silent, as if holding their breath for the truth to emerge. Miss Jane Marple sat by the fire, her knitting needles at rest, her eyes gleaming with the quiet certainty of a woman who had unravelled a tapestry of secrets. The seventh clue. 8 maids, a milking, a debt unpaid, had pointed to a lingering injustice, and tonight the final pieces of the puzzle would fall into place. Sir Henry Ashford stood by the Christmas tree, its ornaments glinting like accusing eyes. Clara Wentworth's sapphire gown shimmered as she sipped her coffee, her smile tight. Lionel Drake, pale but composed, sat beside Eleanor, whose grey eyes burned with defiance. Dr. Rupert Grayson's joviality had vanished, his walrus moustache drooping. Violet Harrow clutched her satchel, her resemblance to Lillian Ashford more striking than ever. Miss Marple's voice broke the silence, gentle but unwavering. This house has been generous with its clues. A broken ornament, a missing carol page, a symbol in a locked room, poisoned wine, a hidden passage, a locket, and a note about an unpaid debt. They all sing the tune of the 12 Days of Christmas, and tonight we reach the 12th clue. Shall we unwrap the truth? Sir Henry's hands trembled. Miss Marple, please, this has gone too far. On the contrary, she replied, it's gone precisely far enough. She produced the locket from her knitting bag, its symbol, a circle with 3 curved lines, catching the firelight. This belonged to Lillian Ashford, your sister, Sir Henry. Her death was no accident, was it? The room stilled. Violet's breath hitched, and Clara's cup clattered in its saucer. Miss Marple continued, her tone calm but relentless. The clues point to a tragedy buried in 1890. Lillian loved a diplomat, a man who vanished after her death. Lionel, you were his clerk. You knew him, didn't you? Lionel's face crumpled. Yes, he whispered. His name was Edward Harrow. He was devastated when Lillian died. He told me she was pushed from that balcony, but no one believed him. I was young, powerless. I kept silent. Eleanor's eyes widened. Lionel, you never told me, because I was ashamed. He snapped, his voice breaking. I failed her. Miss Marple's gaze shifted to Violet. And you, my dear, are Edward's daughter, aren't you? Your resemblance to Lillian, your botanical knowledge, your satchel full of secrets, it's no coincidence. Violet's eyes filled with tears. I found Father's letters after he died last year. He wrote about Lillian, about a debt owed to her memory. I came here to find the truth, but I didn't know how. She opened her satchel, revealing a bundle of letters and a small vial. Empty, but labelled Belladonna. Dr. Grayson gasped. You poisoned the wine! No! Violet cried. I brought it to study, not to use, I swear. Miss Marple's smile was kind but firm. I believe you, Violet, but someone else used your knowledge. Her eyes turned to Clara. Miss Wentworth, you've been remarkably quiet. You knew Edward Harrow, didn't you? A rival actress, perhaps, jealous of Lillian's engagement to him. Clara's face drained of colour. This is absurd. Is it? Miss Marple said. You were seen in the passage, Clara. You recognized the symbol, the Ashford family crest, altered to mark Lillian's death. You pushed her, didn't you? Out of jealousy, or perhaps to protect a secret of your own. You've been leaving these clues to taunt Sir Henry, to force him to confront the past. Clara stood, her voice shrill. You have no proof. But I do, Miss Marple said softly. She produced a final note, found slipped under her door that morning. 12 drummers drumming. Justice comes marching. It was written in Clara's distinctive hand, confirmed by a letter Miss Marple had glimpsed in her room. You orchestrated this game, Clara, to expose Sir Henry's silence about his sister's death, but your own guilt betrayed you. Sir Henry sank into a chair, his voice hollow. "I suspected Clara, but I couldn't face it. I let Lillian's death be called an accident to protect the family name." Clara's defiance crumbled. "She stole Edward from me," she spat. "I loved him, but Lillian took everything. I didn't mean to kill her. It was a moment of rage." She collapsed, sobbing, as Dr. Grayson restrained her gently. Miss Marple's eyes softened. "Justice has marched, as the clue promised. Violet, your father's debt is paid." She turned to Sir Henry. "And you, sir, must make amends by honouring Lillian's memory." As the police were summoned, the guests sat in stunned silence. Violet wept quietly, her satchel now open, her father's letters a testament to a love lost. The Christmas tree glimmered, its light softer now, as if the manor itself exhaled. Later, as Miss Marple packed her knitting bag, Violet approached. "Thank you," she whispered. "You gave me my father's truth." Miss Marple smiled. "Truth is like a Christmas gift, my dear. It's best unwrapped with care." As the car carried her back to St. Mary Mead, the snow fell gently, and Miss Marple hummed the 12 Days of Christmas, satisfied that justice, like a drumbeat, had found its rhythm at last.